with people and just trying to understand how exactly to bring it to life, essentially. So just to give you a quick overview of what the product actually is, we freeze dry fruit in these big chambers, which is essentially the same process that's used by NASA to preserve food for space voyages. And we essentially had to try and find a way, or I had to try and find a way to bring these into these little packets so I could distribute them to schools and to airlines and all these different places. So it was very much an ongoing process of trial and error at university, getting a little bit of help from the university at the time, and asking lots of other food founders, how the hell do you actually start with an idea that's on paper and then actually turn it into something that you can hold and you can give to people, and eventually something that you can sell and people will buy. So it was a strange process because I had no experience in business at the time. From a nutrition background, I had 90% of the time I had zero clue what I was doing. So it was a case of just talking to lots of different people, eventually getting to the point where we had a product and then learning what on earth to do with that. How do you get people to buy it? So that's kind of how it all started. It was this big, messy 3 years of development where wasted a lot of time and money that we didn't have at the time. And that basically brought us to the foundations of the business and the brand and the products where they are now, essentially.
Oh, brilliant. So you say you looked at that problem and looking precisely at what you're trying to focus on, and then that raft of different customers. How did you work that out whilst being at university at the same time, it kind of being a side project along with your nutrition? Like, where's that focus and driver there?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think I'm definitely not the person to go to ask about managing productivity, because especially back at university, it was a bit of a mess. It was featuring a lot of late nights, a lot of weekly burnouts, and a bit of a heavy coffee addiction, which I think it hasn't left just yet. But it's a strange old process, and trying to find the balance of working on my university work and working on this was tough. I think eventually, after a little while, I got into the system of, I realized that the business was the stuff that I enjoyed working on. So I had a lot of energy and time for that. I could do that forever. It was the university work that I was falling behind on, and really had to persuade myself to do it. So I eventually got into the system of, I think they call it eating the frog first or something like that, where you do your university work first, or whether that's your part-time job or whatever, and then because you enjoy your side hustle, it shouldn't be a big deal to work on that later in the day. So eventually fell into the system, but I'm still working it out now, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that's interesting. Striking that balance is so key. And then Mesh, you're slightly different. I know that you've come around it in different ways, and Twist especially has been bore out, but you had a job. So how do you juggle that and kind of get that balance between starting something whilst having other commitments? And we may have lost Mesh. Oh, right, okay. We'll come back to Mesh. So that's really interesting, Dom. So jumping back on there, of how are you finding that balance? Oh, wait, is he coming back? He's back. No, he's silent.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Mesh.
Very strange. Don't know what happened there. Yeah, I heard your question. I was just about to say, yeah, so I was living in London for 7 years by this point, and I was on a plane. So last year was a very different year to me compared to this year, and I was on a plane for about 200 of those days, traveling at speaking gigs and working on my kind of consultancy work. And I came back and I just wanted to meet new people, get out of my existing bubble. And selfishly, I created Twist out of an idea of bringing like-minded people together in a room that perhaps haven't met, but perhaps they should be, and see what happens. So in January, so kind of similar to Dom, perhaps bad timing, in January of this year, I launched Twist Supper Club, and I brought 15 people together, of which Howard was one of them. And they didn't know each other. They didn't know who was turning up. There was essentially no instructions other than be here at this time and do you have any allergies? And the idea behind it was to create an element of mystery and no preconceived ideas. And out of that event where everyone had an incredible time and connected and networked, I decided to go on this journey. So really, I created it out of a frustration, which was I wasn't meeting enough new people, and I perhaps was frustrated by the events that I was going to. So I created it out of my own need and selfish want, and then it kind of snowballed from there, really.
Okay, so from that and that like selfish want, do you think that drove you and was able to be a bit of that passion inside, or did it make it easier to go down that route of taking it and focusing a bit more of the time than and leaving a bit of the consultancy work?
Yeah, I think again, kind of similar to Dom, it was perhaps the consultancy work which was becoming less interesting, and twist and meeting new people and speaking to restaurants and bars and finding interesting guests and seeing how that dynamic would work that actually fueled me. So in a way, I didn't necessarily find that balance difficult because it was a passion and it was driving me. I think if anything, I was trying to weave the narrative of twist into my everyday career and say, hey, I've got an amazing event that I would love to get you involved in. Or, do you like food? Do you like meeting new people? I've got something that I think could be of interest. So in a way, it was a client generation tool for the consultancy business, but it was also a way of engaging people and getting guests for my side hustle.
All right, okay, brilliant. Well, going on from there is, and jumping back to you, Dom, is saying that, and then how's that transition going from, so you'd been playing around in that ballpark for 3 years, and like Mesh was saying, using and trying balancing act between finding potential customers. How's that transition for you? Is because talking to Annabel and Mesh there, we've got kind of those natural transitions of going, this is starting to tip, I'm starting to get customers in. How's that for you though, of finding that transaction of that 3 years of playing around in uni, learning some new things, and then going, oh wow, this is going to become a bit more of a real thing now?
Yeah, there was never one day where it switched, to be perfectly honest. It's only been quite recently that I've been working on Evolved full time. Last year in particular, I was juggling 3 jobs to just cash fund Evolved at the very early stage. And then gradually I found a little bit more time, or there was a little bit more money coming from the business that could pay for a few of the things that I would originally be paying for myself. So it was a gradual transition between me funding everything and having to work part-time on various other jobs to then finally being in a position where the business actually funds itself. And it wasn't just one day that happened. It was over the course of, it's been the 3 years that it all started. So it's strange, and I think I always had it in my head to be a full-time job, and I was very much expecting to wake up one morning and think, today's the day. I can say goodbye to my personal training job and working on this and that. It doesn't really happen like that, or at least in my experience, it really was a transition of gradually moving from part-time and fitting in other part-time paid work to working on this full-time and being able to let go of the other part-time work.
Okay, that's very interesting. Annabelle, how about yourself there in that transition between and the balancing between taking this on full time and also other commitments?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting going into my final year because I knew I wanted to run this business straight after uni. I knew that I didn't want to apply for any kind of grad jobs and anything like that. So in order for me to do that, I kind of had to know that I needed to prepare for, this being my full-time kind of thing. So I think I was quite lucky in the fact that I was able to kind of set a goal quite early on. And I knew that at this point, when I finished uni, like this is what I have to just throw everything into. So that's kind of how I organised my time. So at uni, there was kind of 3 things really for me to be doing. So it was obviously going to lectures and attending seminars and things like that, doing my studying and then doing the business. So yeah, I kind of organised it just by working out how many hours I needed to put into each thing to really get what I wanted. So I kind of had goals set for the business and for uni. And yeah, just kind of worked backwards and worked out how much time I needed to invest in each of those things.
That's brilliant. So they're all quite like structured approaches we've all taken, but how do you get that burning passion and driving it forward? Is because that's something is this isn't something that isn't, like Dom said, it isn't an immediate effect. So how have you kept it going and being that side hustle and burner? That what happens on the bad days or the low days, and what happens on the good days? Could you talk us a bit through that? Annabel, straight back to you on that one. Is that structured approach, but then the goods and the lows potentially?
Yeah, so in answer to your first kind of question, the burning desire came from the fact that I just knew I didn't want to be kind of back in that big corporate world again. So all of my friends and I, like, we all did our placements at quite big companies. So I was Warner Brothers, a few were at Intel, there was SAP, HPE, so all kind of big global companies. And I think I was the only person really out of my friends who had the kind of managerial experience that I had. So it's quite funny. I know I don't really sound northern, but I'm from the north, and my manager was through and through Londoner, and he was like, "Oh, anything above Watford's like the north and all of this." So we would often it was like a mix between banter, but then also at the same time, like he wasn't the best manager, in all honesty. But I feel like that kind of experience really pushed me to realise that I just liked working for myself and kind of doing my own thing, and like just not really having to answer to anyone. So like while everyone was applying for their grad jobs, in my head I was thinking like, oh, should I be doing this instead? And then I was like, do you know what? Like just think back to that year and just think, no, you just don't want to be doing that. So that's kind of how I had the burning passion like continue. And then in terms of good and bad days, I think, yeah, there's really high highs, I think, when you're running your business, but then there's also really kind of low lows. Like, I feel like the way that I work the best is under pressure. So I really feel like all aspects of my life I perform when my back's really up against the wall. So in terms of like exams and coursework and all things like that, I would always be working sort of right to the wire, but would pull out of the bag somehow. So just kind of follow this through into the business as well. But yeah, I think whenever I'm having a bad day, I just know good ones are to come. So that's kind of how I deal with it.
Brilliant. And there's nothing wrong with being a northern. I'll attest to that. But jump me over to Umesh there. A lot of nodding there, an agreement. How do you find that there?
Yeah, so that burning passion came from a frustration more than anything, in terms of I was sitting at an event and we'd paid a lot of money to be there. The speaker wasn't particularly very good, but we came for the draw of the speaker. And then I realized around the table there were 5 of my other mates that I could have easily seen. And collectively, we've just spent about 500 quid on an event that wasn't very good, that I felt I could have done perhaps a better job at. So it came from a frustration of, could I do a better job? And if so, how would I go about it? So that kind of got me on the path. Well, let's do an exercise and bring people together over a dinner and see what happens. So for me, it was born out of frustration, and that passion just hasn't gone. And then I think, kind of touching on the similar things, you get really, to Annabel, you get really, really good high highs, if you like, when you get amazing feedback, when you see someone connect and they're now business partners, or we've had everyone from people going on a date with each other who have met from an event. We've had people who've gone into business with each other. We've people who've built client bases off the back of it. So there's lots of success stories, which has driven that passion even further. But equally, at the same time, things like having a lockdown and not being able to go to restaurants and having to pivot to a virtual model. And the whole point of this business for me was to connect with people and see them and meet them and interact with them. And now we're having to do it in this virtual format has been quite challenging. So there are always bad days, and frankly, you're not an entrepreneur if you don't have some of them. It's what you do to get past it and get through, which makes you, I think, a true entrepreneur. So you just get on with it, really.
Brilliant. Well, we've got our first question. We'll come to that in a moment. Dom, what about you and the highs and lows? I know you've got a very good high tucked away in the bank there, so we'll come on to that in a moment. But have you found the balance between the lows and the highs?
Yeah, I actually read something this morning on LinkedIn. I thought it was a perfect quote that says everything it needs to say about entrepreneurship, which is that entrepreneurship's like a weird combination of feeling like everything around you is falling apart while also coming together at the same time. And that really for me, it just resonated, because you don't know what you're going to wake up to that morning, whether it's going to be the worst email ever or a good email that could change the business. So it's strange, but I think what tends to carry you forward in terms of that passion is momentum that you build. If you just get yourself started, quite often there will be some good news down the line, and that momentum you can use to then, okay, fuel tomorrow and then the day after. And there are lows and there are highs, but I think just that constant momentum, just use that to your advantage. And I don't think, I haven't heard many entrepreneurs that have been in the right business for them say that they've lost passion. It tends to be the ones that feel, I don't want to say that they're faking it, but they don't feel comfortable and they don't enjoy what they're doing in that day. That's when you lose your passion. So you should really be in a position where, with your business, that people are having to tear you away from it to get back to university work, or to go to your 9 to 5, or to spend time with your friends or something like that. I think passion shouldn't really be an issue, and if it is, maybe it's not the right idea, or maybe there's something else to consider there.
That's brilliant. And are you going to share your incredible high, or are you going to make me try and drag it out of you?
I'm trying to work out which one what I told you.
The Google one.
Oh right, okay. Yeah, so that was some really good news. Quite early on this year, actually. It was right before COVID. So we basically got a really good opportunity, which is that the business is now a registered supplier to Google offices. So, which is really cool, because that's quite a quirky thing to say that not a lot of brands can say. So basically, Google offices buy our snacks and they give them to their 7,000 employees in Dublin and other places, which for us is a fantastic opportunity. So yeah, I was super happy with that. And it came from a little bit of luck, really. Luck and maybe good placement. I don't know, probably luck. And we followed through. So yeah, it was really good. But since then, we've been quite busy. It's actually over COVID for us. We've had quite a lot of good news. At the beginning, it was one of those, oh crap moments. Everything has to change. But since then, we've started getting contracts with, like I said, these airline companies, and things just pop up that I wasn't expecting. But ultimately, it's good news. So yeah, we're quite happy at the moment.
That's good. I know, and fantastic once again. I love that. That's a skill of entrepreneurs. They underplay everything. Oh yeah, just Google gives it out to their 7,000 employees. Just a small thing onto the next. We're fine with that. But no, that's brilliant. So we'll come on to our first question of how much support did you guys get from your families getting to your business, and like once again going, because we're of course talking about these being side hustles and transitioning into like the main focus. So how's that support for you with your families going? And Mesh, if I'll jump straight back to you on that one.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say not necessarily as much support from my family, because I didn't need it, but from my friends, I certainly did. As I mentioned, to start my side hustle and to see whether there was if you like, my proof of concept, I had to ask, 15 of my closest friends to say, do you want to come to an event? And I'm not going to tell you much about it, and don't ask any questions. Just turn up and trust me that you're going to have a good time. And so there was an element of taking a leap of faith and giving up your Thursday evening and coming to a restaurant and meeting, some people that you perhaps would never have met before, some people you may have met in person. So there was an element of risk taking and an element of trust that I had to kind of ask for. And from that led to getting feedback, that led to them, giving me support in the direction of, is this a viable option? What would you do differently? How would you scale this? And so that became my kind of advisory board in many ways, those initial people that came to my event. So I think friends have played a vital part in setting up my business and turning it from a side hustle to a business. My family have been really supportive of it, in terms of, they know that every Thursday evening I'm going to be busy and I'm going to be speaking with people around the world and doing cocktail making masterclasses, or sushi making, or wine tasting, as we've got coming up this weekend, this Thursday. So they've kind of rolled with it. But in terms of financial help, I haven't really needed it. I created and paid for that proof of concept myself, tested it out, and then realized that I was onto something. And then now it's paying for itself. So really, I think it's having a good support network, whether they be family or friends, is critical to your success.
Okay, brilliant. And Annabel, if we just jump over to yourself on that, and how have you found that? You said you went to that first networking session with your dad that kind of gave you the entrance and the doorway, but how did that potentially grow and expand as you looked at launching the business and going further?
Sure. So yeah, throughout my whole life, my family have kind of supported me in whatever I want to do. Like ever since I was like very small, apparently I've always been the boss. So whatever I say kind of goes, which is quite nice for me. So yeah, in terms of like monetary support, I didn't really need any kind of financial help because I could just kind of do everything from my laptop and kind of muster it all up myself. Scene obviously helped me financially, and so did Aston Enterprise, so that was really awesome. But in terms of like emotional support, yeah, they've always kind of supported me to do whatever I wanted to do, and I would obviously always tell them kind of throughout placement what that was like working there in like a massive company, and they knew kind of how I felt about that, so they were perfectly happy for me to kind of go away and do what I wanted to do and be an entrepreneur. So yeah, loads of support off them.
Brilliant. Well, Don, I'm going to try to slightly change that question there. We've talked very much around the support networks and everything, but how did you like explain this to people of that you weren't going to do the 9 to 5? It was going to be taking that thing that had been at the side, and they know you've been burrowing away at little bits at a time, but then you're going to go, no, you didn't have this epiphany day. Did they see the momentum shift, or how did that look for those people around you?
Yeah. So I think although I've been developing Evolve for 3 years, since I was 16 or even before, while I was at school, I was very much set on making a business. Probably just because I liked building things at the time. So I think my parents and family all kind of knew that would be the route I went down, and it's really changed in terms of what I wanted to do, what I felt was the right thing for me. But I think they always kind of had that idea at the back of their mind. It was that, and also I didn't get fantastic grades at school, so they were probably hoping that I wasn't planning on, having ambitions to become a doctor, because they knew that it wasn't going to happen. So yeah, in terms of my family, they've also been super supportive in various different ways, and I think it wasn't an overnight thing where I said, guys, I want to start a business. I think they saw it coming, basically, and friends have been pretty similar. At university, they saw how unfocused I was at uni, but when it came to the business, my eyes would light up, so they always knew that that's what I'd be focusing on. So it took a bit of time to persuade some people, but I think they've always seen that from day one, really.
So going from that and seeing that, and they've seen the enthusiasm, were there ever any a time where you doubted yourself you could lean on them? And what would you suggest for others looking at like kind of starting to strike up that balance, which is there between something on like a business they're trying to get going while having so many other things juggling? By the sounds of it, you had about 4 jobs going at the same time, doing a bit of studying, and then trying to run Evolved at the same time. Like a lot going on. So what would you suggest to like others now you've been through that a bit?
Yeah. So it's a tricky one. I think coming down to time management, I think, is critical. But again, I do feel strongly like I'm definitely underqualified for that. As I'm sure the other panelists would say, like building a business, there's so many different things to think about, and I think the thing you tend to dismiss is, with all these different things, having some time to yourself, I think. So the business, like I said, the momentum it does carry itself. If you can manage your time effectively, then happy days, really. But I think my advice to anyone that's planning on starting it out would be factor in some time each week where you're not doing anything business, you're not doing anything work related, uni related. Like go and spend some time with your friends or something like that. Spend some time on you, read a book, watch some Netflix. I think I got really, really absorbed into the whole hustle culture where I was following Gary Vee and Grant Cardone and everyone and Ty Lopez, and they were saying, oh, you got to work every single minute. And it led to just burnouts all the time. And if you plan on making it more than 3 months, which I think is like the average time that a side hustle or business starts out, and either comes crashing down or at that pivotal moment, then yeah, you need to really factor in some time for yourself, essentially. So that would be my biggest thing. Take time off where you just don't, just unfollow Grant Cardone, and Gary Vee, great and everything, but you don't need them every single day. And yeah, just focus on the longevity of it. Focus on, okay, am I going to be able to do this for the next 3 years? Because you can rely on that momentum, but actually you can honestly, you can lose your mind at times if you just get too carried away with just focusing on the business, just making enough money to feed into the business. Like, just to have some time to slow down and enjoy yourself is what I'd probably say to anyone that wants to start off.
Brilliant. Well, just going through that, and it's really interesting you say Gary Vee, and just going through is Mesh is someone else is you love this side hustle and developing ideas because you've also got your podcast, Big Ideas with Mesh. So how do you find that and that balance and the suggestion to others that kind of are juggling all these things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a magpie by nature. I like, shiny things. I like trying new things. So a side hustle for me is just part of who I am DNA wise. So I've always enjoyed it. But, I'm very quick to realize, is this something that has longevity or not? And, similar to what we were talking about earlier, I think Dom mentioned, if I don't have a true passion for it 3 months down the line, then I'm really good at killing things. And I think that's really important. The ability to start something's great, but the ability to kill it if it's not working early on is even more important. So for me, that's been critical to my success. And then with the podcast, which is another side hustle, I'm constantly learning. I'm meeting people, and the general theme throughout, no matter who they are, whether they be entrepreneurs, doctors, whether they be personal trainers, individuals working in education, they come back to mental health, taking time to see friends, family, have balance, because you need balance in everything, and only then will you have true success and longevity, as we mentioned. So for me, actually, the side hustle of the podcast has helped me slow down, has helped me take stock in terms of Twist and the podcast itself, to work out, do I need a break? Do I need to shift gears? Is there a period where I can take a little bit of time off and delegate? So if anything, those two side hustles have allowed me to be a little bit more smart and clever with my time, and ultimately, hopefully, lead to more success.
Oh, brilliant. And glad to see that. And like I say, please share that in the chat if you want to follow it. But Annabel, just something that's really interesting, especially with your business, is social media is everywhere and prevalent in everyday lives. How do you find that balance of getting passionate about work, but then also there's the kind of not social responsibility, but kind of there that something's always churning in the back, which is always in you. So how do you get that break, or potentially what the guys are talking about? Or do you have a different mechanism or way that you get away from everything or find that balance?
I think the only time that I kind of feel like I really get away from everything is the weekend, or when I kind of put my phone away. So obviously with all of these apps, like they're constantly on your phone, like all of my clients have WhatsApp. I don't have a separate work phone. So one of my clients particularly, she's really funny. She's positive psychologist and like life coach. And at like 11 at night, she'll always have her like best ideas, and she'll always be messaging me, and I'm like, oh god, like all right, Kate, calm down, I'll reply in the morning. So yeah, I think definitely what the guys are saying, like just taking time out for yourself, like spending time with your friends, like just your mental health is so important. I think you can't thrive in any aspect of your life if your mental health isn't 100%. So yeah, it's all about time management and just checking in with yourself and making sure that what you're kind of doing you actually enjoy. So for a few like clients that I'd had, like when I was first starting out, I didn't really know what I wanted my niche to be or anything like that. So I was working with like a range of different people, and then I kind of found my niche a little bit when I started working with this positive psychologist. I realized that I really liked that kind of space and like those kinds of people who are super positive, helpful, uplifting. And then that kind of made me think, do you know what, maybe this is what I prefer working with more so than that. So I think it's super important to kind of check in and make sure that you're kind of keeping up to date with how you feel about your business and what you're actually doing. You want to be investing your time into things that you actually enjoy. It's super important to do that.
Brilliant. And well, I'll make sure we've just hired Annabel to help out with some of our marketing, and I'll make sure that I don't hassle you at 11 o'clock then and become one of those people. I'll make sure of it. But that's really interesting hearing those perspectives that you guys are kind of bringing there and understanding. Is there any a time that you think, you know what, this site, because it's been born out of side hustles, that you might go, actually, I want a bit of normality returning? Or do you ever have that thought? I know you're very early starting out, or was there a goal set out, you know, like I will develop this into a business? Has it ever crossed your mind? It's a bit of an open question there of going, oh, this will be my job and business forever, or oh, could it potentially go and drop a bit back into being a side hustle? Open to the floor, guys. I know very.
I'll go. Oh, sorry, go on.
You go.
Okay. I was just gonna say that for me, if anything, I'm doing everything in my power for it to not be necessarily run by me. So hiring the right staff, bringing the right interns, almost removing myself from the day-to-day operation. So in a way, I can't see it turning back to a side hustle. If anything, I'm trying to make it run without me, so there's longevity and it isn't just reliant on me to be successful, if you like. So I guess for me, going back to a side hustle isn't an option. I don't want it to be. I want to scale it. I want to grow it. And so for me, the only way is up. And the only way that I can do that is by delegating and bringing other people into the fold.
Okay, interesting. I think that just leads nicely onto more questions of if you had the chance to sell your business tomorrow and start something fresh, would you do it? Why or why not? I think very much. Let's jump with. I know the next question's for Dom, but I'm going to jump to you there because you do have a product and something. So I'll fire. You probably get 2 questions back to back right now.
So how much are they offering in the chat, by the way?
Well, that's what I was thinking.
No, see, I've thought about it, and I really enjoy what I do, and I'm sure the other guys will say the same. That actually, it's good enough to wake up in the morning and have a cup of coffee. Sorry to come back to coffee again, and to actually sit down and just really enjoy what you're doing and feel like you're investing in yourself. You're investing in this brand that you've seen for the last 3 years. To me, that seems like enough. I think very early on, when people start a business, it's the end goal in mind, which is they want this huge buyout. And especially in the food business, you hear wonder stories of urban fruit and Bear Fruit selling it for 70 million to Lotus Biscoff. And it seems like everyone's dream, but I think over time it's become, reality has kicked in that whether it happens or not, I actually do enjoy what I'm doing every single day. And for me, I've been working quite hard the last 3 years to just get to that point. There's been an awful lot of uncertainty. Waking up in the morning thinking, what on earth am I doing? Why am I starting a fruit snacks business? And yeah, so to be at this point now, I feel very comfortable with where we are. If you'd asked me right before COVID, then it might have been a different answer. But at least now, I'm happy with where we are. So I have to turn it away, unless it was a particularly big figure, then I'd reconsider.
So just jump in. We'll come back to you in a moment, Dom. There's another question for you, but Annabel, just similar to yourself, you mentioned there around jokes and everything about what it was, but how do you feel about like thinking about an exit or potentially selling the business, or is it something you want to really drive going forward?
Yeah, no, I've got absolutely no doubt that I want to kind of carry on with it in the future. I'm kind of not thinking about what I'll be doing kind of in 10 years time, but I know I'll be doing something kind of along these lines. And just like as I was saying before, I think it's really important to not allow your kind of goals to change and things like that. So, I mean, no one knows kind of what's going to happen in the future. So maybe in the future, but right now I'm super happy doing what I'm doing, really enjoy all the people that I'm working with. It makes me happy. So no chance. I don't think I'll ever sell my business.
Brilliant. So Dom, just jumping back, did you start the product development whilst at university or after that, and who and where did you get your feedback from, and then furthermore is how do you build your network and go for that? And Mesh, just to tee you up, we're talking about network. The next type of questions will be coming to you, so we'll come on that one because of the business. But Dom, what about you and the product development and kind of feedback networks for yourself?
So to answer the question, yes, very much started product development at university. where I did get a little bit of support from the university in various different ways, whether that came from sampling opportunities in one of the buildings or access to pitching and network events. Yeah, so the product development definitely started there. In terms of who I got feedback from, a real mix. I think it's good to get feedback from people that are industry specific, because there's been a bunch of times where I've spoken to someone that is a business expert, but they're not a food business expert. And the problem with that is the classic thing they'll say is, "Oh, are you in any supermarkets yet?" And if they say that, then I know instantly it's a red flag, because they don't understand the problems with supermarkets and how supermarkets make you spend a lot of money. So it was very much started off just getting whoever's opinion I could on the product, on the business where I wanted it to go, and realized quite quickly that it really needs to be industry specific. So I really started diving into food specific events. So there's a trade show called Lunch, which I went to not last year, but the year before. And I was in the startup zone, and it's essentially where you get to meet buyers of Tesco and Whole Foods and all these different people that would essentially change the life of the business. And I got some horrible feedback quite early on. It was a shocking product that I went in with. It was very, very, very early on. So it was ugly. It tasted horrible. And they really weren't holding back on that feedback. But from that, although I was totally in love with the business, I didn't realize that it tasted horrible. It looked terrible. Not from a business background, not from a branding background. That advice was enough for me to go, okay, right, something needs to change. And it's been events like that where it's very industry specific, where you're looking for harsh criticism that have had the biggest impact on the business for me. So that and at the same time, it really does help building your network. So if you can find events that are specific to your industry, then definitely tune in as much as you can. Sometimes they cost a lot of money, so I'd say, avoid those. There are really good events out there, such as Bread and Jam. These are very food specific. Bread and Jam, a few Virgin Startup related events that have been really helpful, and random crazy things come from them as well. Like we've had this airline contract came from a 1-minute pitch that I'd completely forgotten about to a buyer in a big catering company, and it was 4 months later, and I didn't think it was a particularly great pitch, and suddenly in my inbox was, oh, we're looking for a fruit snack product to feed to the crew of a large airline. So it's very much just tune into the industry, focus on the specific events, and get your feedback from them as opposed to just everyone and anyone.
Okay, brilliant. And then jumping on to yourself, Umesh, is about how for yourself and Twist Supper Club is, you mentioned earlier you got the 15 in the room, and then how do you spark and get feedback, and then also grow that network further afield of finding those that are, like you say, you've taken it international, that would be potentially interested. How have you gone about that, especially in a time where networking face to face has been a lot more limited?
Yeah, no, it's for me, feedback and honest and critical feedback is more valuable than anything. So, I made sure that the feedback that I got from everyone in the room was perhaps not the day after or the day after that. It was a couple of weeks later. In fact, for me, it's getting feedback is getting it in the moment is never as good as getting it 2 weeks later, because then you truly appreciate what they remember or what they don't remember. And then that gives you, I guess, perhaps better insight in my case. So for me, it was just asking questions, trying my hardest not to be leading with my questions. And I'm guilty of this as well. I want a specific outcome or an answer. So you ask a question another way. So sometimes it's perhaps better to just be bored and go, just dump it on me. Tell me everything that you like, dislike, or you change, rather than me kind of filtering it. And then I think the other thing that for me has been really good is by putting it out there and by just putting out what I'm trying to do and getting feedback from people that perhaps even haven't heard of Twist, and putting it on my social networks, good things came of it. So then a lady reached out to me that was in my network, but I hadn't spoken to for 4 years. And she said, hey, I want to know more about Twist. I think I could add some value. Can we go for a coffee? So we went for a coffee. She told me that she works in fashion tech, which is nothing to do with the field that I've ever worked in. But she said that for the last 4 years, she's been moonlighting as a supper club host and has a wealth of experience and networks and relationships. And she would like to come on board as my business partner if I would be open to having that conversation. So by asking for feedback on my brand and my identity and this idea that I'd come up with, I'd now found a new business partner that has a completely different skill set to me, which has really kind of driven the business forward now.
Brilliant. No, that's really interesting of how the different approaches, and I think there's some real gems in there about thinking about those things that have gone before, and then 4 months popping up and coming into the inbox, and then also seeing how you can expand and taking those opportunities. I think just with the question that's come through, Annabel, I'll pass over to yourself now. Is kind of what has been the like business biggest mistake potentially, or and then one that might have led to like the best outcome that is seen in that epiphany moment of learning from it type moment, if any?
In all honesty, I don't feel like I've really had a big sort of business mistake, but I don't know whether that's maybe just because of my kind of perspective. Like, I just live by the saying, like, every day is a school day and things like that. And I think one of the really important things that I learned whilst I was on placement year was kind of ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So whilst I was on placement, quite more often than not, I'd be kind of double checking and making sure I was doing things right and things like that. I think it's just almost better to kind of just get stuck in and give it a go, and then you can kind of show people what you've done and see kind of their feedback, like we were saying before about feedback, what they kind of think about it. So yeah, I think I'm just not really in a mindset where I think of big mistakes. You know what I mean? I mean, if I'd really like cock something up, then I would say, but I just don't think I have really so far. So fingers crossed it'll stay that way.
That's always a positive thing. Is once again, is it a mistake you've actually made, or if you're learning from it, bouncing through?
Yeah.
But okay, just switching then, and also hopefully the fingers crossed it keeps going. Really. But Dom, switching over, it was really interesting there. You said that you were so in love with the brand, so in love with the product. You took it to a trade show and you were told and slated it was a terrible product or it wasn't any good. Kind of going through that, was that kind of the culminating of the biggest mistake, or you said learn from it, or was there one that was even more magnitudinal for you?
It's definitely up there with one of it's one of the worst, I'd say. But further on that, just to give you some background, I got some interest from a company that might have wanted to buy the snacks, and I jumped on this really soon. I was so hyped up that I didn't have a name for the business yet. I didn't have a name for the brand, so I literally word generated what came up with Instinct Bites, which retrospectively I cringe at to this day. And I literally just put it on the packet, and we made 150,000 impressions, which was another huge mistake, because if you can try and negotiate down your minimum order quantities with your suppliers, you really should push for that. And for a startup to create 150,000 of anything is ridiculous. So anyway, I put it on the packet and we filled it with fruit and we got the system all together, and I took it to this trade show and I was like, right, come on then, Tesco, let's have it. I'm ready to sell millions. And it was an exhibition, so you'd have your posters and your packets and stuff. I'd have the buyers of Whole Foods and Sainsbury's and stuff. They'd glance at it and then walk straight off. And I'd spend quite a lot of money to be there. I was quite upset that they were barely even acknowledging the product. And I remember it was end of day 2. We had virtually no interest. And I just tapped someone on the shoulder and said, why is no one looking at this for more than 3 seconds? And it's because it's very small packaging, and Instinct Bites essentially every single time was being read as insect bites. And I've seen it. I couldn't. You get so close to something, you don't see the little things like that. But 90% of people that walked by thought I was selling insects in a bag, which for most people is an issue when they want to buy fruit. So that was a huge issue, and I think the moral of that is not. I was very set on the design. I was in love with it. I don't know why. But just because I built it myself and I hadn't asked that many people, and I knew I was right because I was a branding genius at the time. So I thought, and yeah, that was a huge mistake. It's just not talking to enough people, specifically the customers. We didn't really have any customers, so there was no one to talk to. But yeah, there's been a whole bunch of mistakes. Most of it is rushing into things, which is a bit of a negative trait of mine I've been working on. But most of the mistakes have been from just not slowing down, not talking to enough people, and assuming that I'm right. And I'm going to say trusting my instinct, which is the worst part.
Oh, sorry, Annabel, what would you say?
You said trust your insects instead.
Yeah,
I just had something to add there in terms of for Twist, in that it's all well and good talking to lots of people, but sometimes you do have to trust your instincts as well. In my case, when we were looking at a logo and creating this into something, I actually went to those 15 people, including Howard, and said, look, I've gone to someone who is a branding expert and got these 10 different designs for a logo. Can you give me some feedback? I went to those initial 15. So they were part of my user journey constantly, but then also I went to people outside. And in the end, based on all the different feedback that I got, I still went with my gut, and I still went, I know all of that feedback's great and I've taken it on board and I will tweak some of it. But in the end, the one that most people chose, I still didn't like. And ultimately it was still my business. It was still my brand. It was still me that was going to have to go out and sell it day to day. And if I didn't like it, I wasn't going to do a good job. So I think there's a case to be said that feedback's great up until a point, but sometimes at the end of the day, they've looked at that for 5 minutes. You have to look at it for the rest of your life, hopefully, or until you exit it. So there's a case to be made to just kind of sometimes trust your gut a little bit.
Oh, definitely. That's interesting. I think I remember those feedback conversations, Mesh. They're very fun times. But that leads on nicely to another question that's gone through. These are side hustles. Where did it take from? Of course, there's being a sole trader, but then becoming a limited company, and then also where you meant with some of the legal protection. I know yourself, Mesh, around trademarking. How and when did you start that process and really going, you know what, this is it? Did you jump on it immediately with the side hustle, or did it take a bit of time to get there?
Yeah, so for me, it was quite a simple one. I'd been thinking about running a supper club idea for about 2 years, but never did it until January of this year. And then from there, I trademarked, or rather, I incorporated the company in May of this year, and then kind of got the ball rolling straight away. So it still took me a good couple of months where I was figuring out, is this what I want to be doing? How would it work? How much money do I need to put into this? So there was a period of time where I was still thinking this is going to be a side hustle. As soon as I incorporated the company, I knew that I was going to turn this into a full-time business. For me, the minute I incorporated it was the minute I was going to go, okay, how do I move this forward? How do I get a salary from this? How do I pay staff? So, but up until that point, I was just thinking I'll do 4 a year. I think I remember saying to Howard, I was going to do them quarterly and just do one, every 4 months or so, every 3 to 4 months, and see how it goes for the first year. But then I realized, actually, I can see a play here. I can see the ability to work with corporates, the ability to work with startups, the ability to help new independent brands and bring people through the doors. So as soon as I incorporated it, I was like, right, let's make this happen.
Brilliant. And that's, and like you're saying earlier, that 3-month kill it process, you kind of went through that January, and then kind of March some difference, and then May you were like, this is my baby, and running with it. Would you say that's about true?
Yeah, so actually it was probably about 3 months. I ran the event in January. I then went traveling again, so I was away for most of February and a bit of March. I came back, and then I was still thinking about it again whilst I was traveling, whilst I was away. I was constantly thinking about Twist, so the passion was there. And then I was thinking about doing my next event in around March, and then obviously the lockdown hit, and I was like, well, what do I do now? So I thought, let's pivot it, let's do virtual, let's incorporate the company. at that point, naively or not, I didn't think COVID was going to be as big as perhaps it is now, and with perhaps a bit of naivety there. But regardless, I thought, well, I'm still going to go ahead and do it. I'm still going to pivot and change and adapt, but I do want to do this as a business. So yeah, about 3 months.
Oh, that's brilliant. And Annabel, what about yourself? Have you gone through the process as well of saying is because you were very focused, came out of that placement year, making sure and did you dive straight in, or did you potentially wait, and were there any ramifications which came with that?
I would say, yeah, I think I kind of waited until waited until my exams were kind of done before I properly kind of kicked everything off and really kind of threw myself into it. Yeah, so while I was kind of studying, I was like planning what I needed to do and like how I was going to make it work and things like that. So yeah, it was kind of all about planning and just kind of goal setting. And as I was saying before, like working backwards, really. That's what I was kind of doing.
So kind of setting that up and setting everything up before you had that big launch and really keeping it away and just chipping away as the side hustle.
If opportunities came up for example, there was quite a few times where people would say to me like, oh, my mum like works in a care home, they're looking for someone to do their social media and things like that, then obviously I would always like kind of jump at those opportunities. But in terms of seeking them whilst I was kind of doing uni 100%, I wasn't doing it as much as I obviously am now and was when I finished my exams.
And that's interesting to see, and taking it and seizing those opportunities. But the interesting question that's just come in the chat then is, do you use social media to market your social media agency, and how do you like once again strike that balance and go from there?
Yeah, so I definitely did whilst I was at uni and before I kind of had my main sort of clients. But yeah, as soon as they started kind of coming through, it actually just kind of slipped a little bit to the wayside. And I feel like I'm just kind of focusing on everyone else's social media at the minute. So I've not really been doing my own, to be honest. But I used it to promote my business through paying as well. So that's why I used a little bit of my VC grant for Facebook advertising. And that resulted in a few leads and a few sort of conversations over Zoom, which was really interesting. So it definitely does work.
Brilliant. And then Dom, coming to yourself, I think we can do a bit of a mix there. Is you kind of said originally you had one type of brand, was it Instinct Bites? Did you like legal and trademark that up? And did you ever have a bit of the overlap issue of started to brand and market that through social media? Or was it straight to Evolved? How did that kind of play out, having one brand and then having to switch to another?
So it was Instinct Bites for several months, and I did invest quite a lot of my time on the face of the brand, which was social media and various other angles. And I think I maybe spent a bit too much time. I gave it a 30-day countdown to the launch of Instinct Bites, expecting everyone to give a damn. And people's attention span is already pretty short. They don't care when it's day 25. It was a real mistake that I made quite early on, and it really confused things later on when I realized the back end of the business wasn't right. So I had to change that, and Evolved emerged as definitely the better brand, and we've really focused in on our theme and our design, and it's undoubtedly a lot better now. But it was confusing for people that originally saw us as Instinct Bites, and I'd invested so much time in telling the world about that, and then suddenly to change it over to Evolved, it's super confusing. So if I could do it back, I wouldn't have announced Instinct Bites unless I was 100% happy with it, which I wasn't at the time, and I would have focused that time and attention on getting other people's thoughts that were my customers and getting someone to tell me that it looks like insect, because I don't know how that slipped through 6 months of development. But yeah, that time definitely for me could have been invested elsewhere. And even now, I feel I focus a lot of time on social media promoting Evolved. I never really knew why at the time. I think I just did it because every other brand that I saw would do it. And I didn't have that strategy in mind. And now that we've started to develop that strategy, like, okay, well, which channels do you want to actually drive customers through? Or is it there to look more credible as a brand? Now that we've done that, it's been a lot more effective. But up until then, very confusing social media messages, and having the two brands didn't help.
Right, so it really had that issue of kind of having two brands running at the same time and seeing and confusing customers. How was it was there an effect across your different channels and promote, or did it affect your market you're going to? Was it just customers that were affected, or larger brands as well that might have potentially recognized you?
Yeah, I didn't realize at the time that there were some brands that I had reached out to the founders and actually got a lot of help from. They did acknowledge the existence of Instinct Bites, which I was very surprised about. And later on, I had to explain that Evolve had switched from Instinct Bites, which wasn't a huge thing. I mean, it's such a tiny brand that really no one cares as much as I do. But yeah, there was a little bit of explaining to do, and it took a little bit of effort to change people's minds. The biggest effort was switching the brand, and suddenly these 150,000 impressions, these packets, well, I couldn't really do anything with them because that brand didn't exist anymore. That was the bigger panic, is that there's so much on the back end of the business to change: the website domains, the trademarking, the legals. Telling customers that we've changed name was actually the least significant of all the issues.
No, that is really interesting, seeing and making the timing right of when to actually lead with the brand. And Mesh, just going through with that, of you took your time with Twist to build up and decide that was it. But how have you then gone about potentially? Is it you've identified your market and then approached them and use social media to do that, or have you gone more release onto social media and potentially see where it lands and what markets and where and who is attracted to that brand?
Yeah, it's been very much, I took the time, as you said at the start, before launching, but with social media, it's been, let's get the events out there, let's do a promotion. So for example, when we run an event, we have a live scribe that creates a beautiful graphic and illustration post event, and we publish that to our social media so people can see that. It's not only a memento for our guests, but also people can see what happened if they've missed it. And it's also because we run a masterclass, whether it be wine, whether it be cocktail making, the graphic in isolation is providing value to the wider public as well, because they can read it and they can see how to make a martini cocktail or how to make, Pimm's in a jug, whatever it may be. And for me, actually, that's been a really good way of getting not only people interested in the brand and reaching out and saying, hey, how do I get involved? When's the next event? Because we don't release the event. We don't have like a website where you can sign up to all the different events. It's an invite only thing initially. We do publish out or push out the event perhaps the week before, but generally, because we're only running between 8 and 9 people, we keep it super intimate. And the key with this and the success of our events is really the breadth and diversity of the types of people that are going to. So we don't necessarily have a specific niche of person. We want as many different people as possible excited in the brand. But social media has been really good, not only in terms of getting customers and users and people coming to the platform, but it's been a really good way of brands, reaching out to us going, hey, can I run a masterclass on our amazing alcohol brand? Or, I run a bread making company. Could I do a little masterclass and come on board? So the guy who is running our wine event on Thursday, he was the president of the Wine Society at Oxford University. He actually works for PwC in their sustainability team, but this is his side hustle. So his side hustle is now joining my side hustle, and we're working together, if you see what I mean. So yeah, social media has been great for reaching out to people like that.
Definitely interesting, and that's just kind of nice with the question that's come through. And Annabel, I'll come to you. Is of course with these tighter restrictions and how the government has gone forward, and we'll come back to government grants potentially with yourself, Dom, if there's any. But with people flooding and rushing to go virtual and more using platforms like this, have you seen an increase of interest in potentially your services, or seeing any trends which are picking up that businesses starting to notice that they're really preparing for with these stricter restrictions?
Yeah, I feel like everyone's kind of prepared themselves now, because we all kind of had to do it so suddenly from March this year just gone. So I think in terms of kind of preparing my business, I've not really had to, because from the very start I've always kind of just been online and spoken to people sort of on video calls and things like that. But in terms of my clients, yeah, so with the sort of positive psychologists who I'm working with, everything that they do is like virtual now, and they're really keen on like growing their presence online because it's super important. And obviously everyone's online now. If you can't go outside and you can't sort of go into places and meet new people, the way that you can do it now is online. So it's definitely, everyone's kind of getting used to it. And I think, yeah, it's really, really good for my business, obviously, because there are so many people who are trying to make that transition, and yeah.
Got the business come in. But so, Dom, just switching over to you. You really interesting there. You said you had the Google success, you had that beginning of the year, fantastic. That was very face to face. But then actually during COVID and the initial potential lockdown, is you actually increased in being busier. Did that mean you were searching out for potential grants or any help, or were you more focused on just trying to grow the business organically?
I definitely kept an eye open for grants, but I've found in the past they're often a lot of work and very little time do we actually qualify for them. So it ends up being more frustrating than anything else. So I don't rely on them. I really don't put that much effort into it because it just really comes off for us basically. So I put more time into trying to grow the business, and some channels were great over COVID, whereas some channels completely collapsed in terms of sales. So Amazon, for example, we launched on Amazon Prime coincidentally the day that we went into lockdown. So naturally, that was quite a nice channel for sales as everyone was going to Amazon during COVID, and to some extent still are. But a lot of offices that we were operating in, obviously, they no longer exist. So it's been it's been very strange and random because you couldn't forecast which businesses would close and which would be a huge channel. And as I mentioned, with what we call food service, which is not the typical like supermarket retail sector, it's very much these extra quirky little things that you can get into, such as Google, such as airlines, such as GWR, which is our most recent listing. So things pop up, and I think it's about being in the right line of fire for those. You can't really forecast who you're going to get that business from, but just making sure that you make it clear that you're open to business and that you're operating at full capacity. That's at least how I think how we managed to get the opportunities that we did.
Okay, brilliant. Right. Well, I'm very aware of the time, and we've spent some really good time talking about this evening, some ideas. So we'll just look at wrapping up. If you've got any more questions, please throw them in the chat, and we'll look at wrapping up. But I think just once again, the question is back. Is this around side hustles? Is what is kind of the biggest challenge and maybe potential fear going forward of, is it anything personally around you dealing or running your business of making that transition, or is it just actually now you're so focused in the business that that's your passion and your driver there? Is that where the focus is? And what are the potential challenges in the 6 months coming or potential year, 12 months? Annabel, if we go to you first.
Yeah, I think the passion's still kind of there for it. It's definitely moved from a side hustle into full-time business, and obviously this is kind of what I want to do and what I want to go for. So I think in terms of challenges in the future, I think, I don't know, maybe just kind of how to sort of scale up and maybe taking on employees and things like that. Those are the kind of challenges that I'm thinking about and kind of considering. But yeah, in terms of kind of it all ending or anything going like horribly wrong, I just don't think that'll happen. So we're trying to stay positive on that one. I don't think that'll be something that kind of comes up. So yeah, just kind of staying positive and moving forward with it.
Brilliant. And Don, what about yourself? 12 months?
Yes, similar really to Annabel. Now looking to the next year for what opportunities might come about, whether it's in food service or retail or whatever. Last week, actually, I pitched to our first supermarket, and that looks quite promising. So that could be something I'd consider if it worked for the business. And that's very much looking at 2021 now. So very much keen on growing the channels that already exist. I've only just really in the last 6 months got my head around how do you operate a business in terms of finance and inventory management and make sure you don't get out of stock and all these other things. And now finally, I think I've just about got my head around it. So I'm thinking, right, next year I can apply that to scale up the business, just like Annabel said.
Brilliant. Okay. And then I think Mesh is like, is there anything you found more difficult growing and starting off with these side hustles? I know you've got, like I say, you've got the podcast, you say you're always learning with that. Twist, was there anything you see as more difficult than you ever expected with this? I know COVID, of course, that face-to-face interaction is a bit of an easy one, but was there anything else that was like, I did not see that coming and maybe completely blindsided you?
Yeah, I think other than the obvious, as you mentioned, of probably this year being a one-hit wonder for an in-person event for me, being the first proof of concept and the rest being virtual, I think what has surprised me is the interest abroad. So we have a little community now in Belgium, in Holland, in New York State, in Canada, and India, and Sweden that all want to run their own twist events. And they all have their own little communities of people that they want to bring on board. So for me, I think the biggest challenge is how do I now manage and train the next group of hosts, the next live scribes, the individuals that are going to be the face of the company in their respective sectors, having never met them in person, having them never attended a full twist event in its actual, I guess, full vision and version of it, and doing that, navigating, this world of, it seems, I don't see us having any kind of in-person dinners till at least mid 2021 in the UK, or at least in London. So for me, that's been a real challenge in the business, is how do I build and motivate and train a completely remote team, which I didn't realize perhaps 6 months ago that I would need, but we are where we are. And that's been an interesting challenge. But at the same time, it's been really, I guess, positive and exciting in that we're going to be seeing our first twist events going internationally. We're going to see people finally meeting in person in other countries that are perhaps have more relaxed rules and are not being affected by COVID as much. So that's exciting.
That's brilliant. It's seeing that success, and thank you. And Dom, just jumping back to yourself there, another question is, you didn't come from a business background, I know, and what resources did you use to potentially expand your knowledge, and where did you go from with that?
Sure. So a lot of it was from the mistakes, I'll be honest, over the 3 years, just making mess up after mess up. You obviously have to learn from them, otherwise you go the opposite direction. So that's one of the worst answers. But apart from that, I did get a lot of information about the food industry was surprisingly through other food founders. So people that had created food businesses that were already selling in supermarkets were unbelievably nice and open about sharing information. I assumed that business was this horrible world where everyone's keeping their secret ingredient in a safe behind them and no one wants you to be successful. But actually, it's, at least in my industry, it's quite friendly. So I was able to utilize those resources and just literally asking questions to food founders and to employees of companies that had that experience that I lacked. Now at this stage, now that we're looking to scale, I'm also thinking about, okay, who on earth does know what they're talking about in this industry? Because I certainly don't. So I'll talk to the category experts, the consultants, and I do try and get their take on things. And I think it's about being quite open about your weaknesses, and I've got plenty of them, and just trying to fill them with other people that can provide their input through their own experience. So in terms of the food industry, at least from my experience, it's been really friendly and open. And I'd always say anyone that wants to start a food business, if they've got any questions, ping me an email, and I'd love to help where I can. So yeah, just ask anyone and everyone is what I'd say.
Great. And Annabel, just coming over to you before we wrap up, what about yourself? Was there anywhere that you was like your go-to and potentially expanding a bit of your knowledge while you were starting to, because of course you said you took it from placement, building up that knowledge and kind of it wasn't the beginning, it wasn't the 16, like Dom saying, coming through uni, always focusing. So where did you potentially turn to kind of get that knowledge base that could help you because you wanted to start coming out of university?
Sure. So the original course that I went on was kind of full of the people who were teaching it were obviously social media experts, and they were obviously delivering the course, and they were kind of exactly where I wanted to be. And I think it's really helpful to kind of see someone be in the position that you want to be in and almost think, right, they're there, how do I get there? And to be honest, I just tested them all the time, and I was like, can I just have a call with you, and like, what can I kind of do for you? So just recently I've started working with one of them after like 2 years of bugging this one guy and being like, is there anything that I can help you with? Or I think, yeah, just kind of taking every opportunity to talk to the sort of market leaders in your industry is what will, just make you grow, because as Dom was saying, everyone is super lovely, and like there's enough people out there with, problems that need solving, and you're just wanting to help people basically, and someone who's in your same field just will respect that and hopefully want to help you out.
No, it's brilliant, and well, congratulations! After 2 years of hustling them, it's paid off. So fantastic. So that's everything. Is once again, thank you so much to our 3 guests this evening. Thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully you found that really useful. Once again, our entrepreneurs this evening are really happy to connect. I'm just about to put a LinkedIn in the chat. But no, thank you so much, Mesh, Dom, and Annabel. And yeah, good luck in the future. And we really hope to see the successes. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
See you now. Bye-bye.
Bye.